Evening, everyone. Oh, wow, thank you. Thanks for coming out in the rain. So, this year in Falmouth, we have been invited graciously by Arts Falmouth to their 25th year old live arts event to open with a Juneteenth celebration. So this is a special time for us. I'm going to ask you to make 2 more claps, okay? Not for me. My name is Jean Morrison. I wear a lot of hats on Cape Cod, but I'm here this weekend as the new co-president of the Cape Cod League of Women Voters. Come out and see them through the weekend. They'll be here helping out with voting information. And anybody you know that's not registered, please send them down. I'm also the president of Amplify POC Cape Cod, which is a 2-year-old nonprofit organization that helps to promote people of color-owned businesses, to give people a fair opportunity for growing businesses on Cape Cod. The people I really wanted you to clap for, though, first, the governor of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, for writing an order and making Juneteenth a state holiday. And he did this before. The second clap is for President Joe Biden, who made Juneteenth a federal holiday. So in addition to celebrating with food and dance and music and great people, you get Monday off. So welcome, and thank you for celebrating this joyful time with us tonight. Thank you, Arts Falmouth, again in Maryland. I don't know if you're here, but I want to acknowledge you for planning all of this. So let me just tell you a little bit about Juneteenth. Originating in Galveston, Texas, 156 years ago. Juneteenth is considered the longest running African American, or Black, holiday, but only recently, as I just announced, began to be recognized across the country and now including Cape Cod. It's an important time in our history to know and to remember. In this present day, we should all celebrate. Juneteenth is a holiday that commemorates the end of slavery. It gets its name by combining, anybody know? June and 19th. And you're going to get to hear that proclamation today. It was June 19th, 1865, when slavery ended in Galveston, Texas. How many years before that was the Emancipation Proclamation written and delivered and slavery was really over? Anybody? Just go like this. 2. That's right. Emancipation Proclamation was made effective in 1863, but it could not be implemented in places still under Confederate control. As a result, the westernmost Confederate state of Texas kept people enslaved for another 2 years, until freedom finally came on June 19th, 1865, when some 2,000 Union troops arrived in Galveston Bay. The Army announced that more than 250,000 enslaved Black people in the United States were free by executive decree. This day came to be known as Juneteenth by the newly freed people in Texas, who were the first to begin to celebrate. And it's been celebrated there and popping up in other places. Didn't get really popular until the Civil Rights Movement, ever since then. June was made a Massachusetts state holiday on July 24th, as I said, by Governor Charlie Baker, and a federal holiday on June 17th, 2021. I'm sorry, July 24th, 2020, and then the federal holiday 2021. Officially commemorating the emancipation, I'm going to say this again, officially the United States commemorating the emancipation of enslaved African Americans. It's also often observed to celebrate African American culture through prayer, song, food, family, friends, community gatherings like this one, and some of the other things that will be shared throughout this weekend. More modern Juneteenth celebrations include the first flag. Can you bring the flag up here and show everyone? It was created, this is the official Juneteenth flag. It was created in 1997 by Ben Haith, the founder of the National Juneteenth Celebration Foundation. The first Juneteenth flag has Massachusetts ties. Anybody know about that? Okay, I'll tell you. It was flown in Roxbury, Massachusetts, Heritage Park in the year 2000, the very first flag. I want to keep it here because I'm just going to tell you about it. This was intentional to show that the formerly enslaved and their descendants are now free Americans. The individual symbols depicted on the flag represent the ark, a new horizon, meaning fresh opportunities and promising futures for Black Americans. The star is a nod to the Lone Star State, where Juneteenth was first celebrated. And it also stands for the freedom of every Black American in all 50 states. The burst, the outline surrounding the star, is meant to reflect a nova, or new star, which represents a new beginning of freedom and equality for all. Thank you. Yeah. There's another flag that you'll see flying. And of course, the American flag flies. I knew they had one here in the square and up and down the street, so I didn't bring one. But it's very important to Black Americans, African Americans, that we honor and recognize our country as much as everybody else. And so we really have the three flags: the American flag, Juneteenth flag, and this flag is called the Pan-African flag, or the Afro-American flag, Black Liberation flag. Those are three common names that you hear. The bands of red, black, and green were created in 1920 by members of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, founded by Marcus Garvey and Amy Ashwood Garvey. Young man said to me earlier today, behind every good man, there's a what? Good woman. So the two of them got together and did some activism to you young folks long before Black Lives Matter and the Civil Rights Movement. They were activists from the beginning of the first slave ships that landed here. So it's really important to know that you stand on generations and generations and generations and generations of shoulders in the fight for equality, again, for all. So the Garveys, this was their response to the Coon song, and It was a song in the late 19th century that was kind of mocking and ridiculing black people and also Native American people. So again, Juneteenth is also solidarity in standing with our Native brothers from Cape Cod and across America. It was really a shorthand term for raccoon, alluding to cunning, sly, rustic, not very flattering characteristics. There were actually also 3 ragtime songs and tunes across the country that were popular hits, called the Coon Song. So the Black Liberation Flag is an important symbol alongside the Juneteenth flag to proclaim freedom from those stereotypes and celebration of a proud, strong identity of black people. The red represents the bloodshed through struggles of black people who have suffered and still suffer untimely deaths caused by racism and hate. And those things persevere. The green represents a soil black people have toiled to create the richness of this land and the freedom, equity, and opportunities and promising futures that we are still fighting for. The black is for the richness, power, and strength of black people who, despite adversity, have persevered, excelled, contributed, and continue in their achievement as Americans. Thank you. So now that you have a bit of history, let's hear from some folks that were around during the time of the Civil War and leading up to Juneteenth. So we have some students from Falmouth High School and a couple of other visiting students and gracious audience members that I picked on to come up and reenact for you or share with you more like some of who they were and what their contributions were. But before I bring the students up, we can't start the rest of this celebration without actually hearing from the general himself, General Gordon Granger, graciously played by our own Representative David Vieira.
Thank you, Jean. You know, from the first days of the Civil War, slaves had acted to secure their own liberty. The Emancipation Proclamation confirmed their insistence that the war for the Union must become a war for freedom. It added a moral force to the Union cause, and it strengthened the Union both militarily and politically. Although the Emancipation Proclamation did not end slavery in the nation, it did capture the hearts and imaginations of millions of Americans and fundamentally transformed the character of the war. After January 1st, 1863, every advance of federal troops expanded the domain of freedom. Moreover, the proclamation announced the acceptance of black men into the Union Army and Navy, enabling the liberated to become liberators. And just a few weeks ago, we celebrated the national rededication of the 54th Regiment Monument Memorial in Boston in honor of those men that so bravely fought for the Union cause and their own freedoms. By the end of the war, almost 200,000 black soldiers and sailors had fought for the Union and their freedom, and the emancipation was a milestone along the road to slavery's final destruction, making Juneteenth both necessary and possible. On June 19, 1865, I headed to the Union-controlled Southern Territory taking with me 2,000 federal troops. Those territories were still holding black enslaved people 2.5 years after our president, God rest his soul, Abraham Lincoln, on January 1st, 1863, issued his historic Emancipation Proclamation. The troops and I entered Galveston, Texas to issue my General Order 3, which informed the people of Texas that slavery was indeed ended, and I delivered the following order. Headquarters District of Texas, Galveston, Texas, June 19, 1865. General Order Number 3. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. By order of Major General Granger, attested by F.W. Emory, Major Assistant Adjutant General. In the order, and with the troops that I brought to Galveston, we were taking federal action to enforce the law of the land of our past president. And when he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, he did that 100 days before it took effect, so that states could take the appropriate actions. The actions I took in Galveston is because those states did not take the appropriate action. And the proclamation I reference in General Order 3 was issued by the President of the United States, whereas on the 22nd day of September, in the year of our Lord, 862, a proclamation was issued by the President of the United States containing, among other things, the following to wit: that on the first day of January in the year of our Lord, 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall be then, thenceforward, and forever free. And the executive government of the United States, including the military and naval authority thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of such persons, and will do no act or acts to repress such persons, or any of them, in any effects, that they may make their actual freedom. That the executive will, on the first day of January aforesaid by proclamation, designate the states and parts of states, if any, in which the people thereof respectively shall be then in rebellion against the United States. And the fact that any state or the people thereof shall be on that day in good faith represented in the Congress of the United States by members chosen thereto at elections wherein a majority of the qualified voters of such state shall have participated, shall, in the absence of strong countervailing testimony, be deemed conclusive evidence that such state and the people thereof are not then in rebellion against the United States. Now therefore I, Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, by virtue of the power vested as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States, in time of actual armed rebellion against the authority and government of the United States, and as a fit and necessary war measure for suppressing said rebellion, do on this first day of January in the year of our Lord, 1863, and in accordance with my purpose to do publicly, proclaimed for the full period of 100 days from the day first above mentioned, order and designate as the states and parts of states wherein the people thereof respectively are this day in rebellion against the United States, the following to wit: Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, except the parishes of St. Bernard, Plaquemines, Jefferson, St. John, St. Charles, St. James Assumption, Terrebonne, La Fourche, St. Mary, St. Martin, and Orleans, including the city of New Orleans, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia, except the 48 counties designated as West Virginia. And also the counties of Berkeley, Accomack, Northampton, Elizabeth City, York, Prince Anne, and Norfolk, including the cities of Norfolk and Portsmouth, and which accepted parts are, for the present, left precisely as if this proclamation were not issued. And by virtue of the power and for the purpose aforesaid, I do order and declare that all persons held as slaves within these designated states and parts of states are and henceforward shall be free, and that the executive government of the United States, including the military and naval authorities thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of said persons. And I hereby enjoin upon the people, so declared to be free, to abstain from all violence, unless in necessary self-defense. And I recommend to them that in all cases, when allowed, they labor faithfully for reasonable wages. And I further declare and make known that such persons of suitable condition will be received into the armed service of the United States, to garrison forts, positions, stations, and other places, and to man vessels of all sorts in said service. And upon this act, sincerely believed to be an act of justice, warranted by the Constitution, upon military necessity, I invoke the considerate judgment of mankind and the gracious favor of Almighty God. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the United States to be affixed. Done at the city of Washington, this first day of January, in the year of our Lord 1863, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 87th. Signed by President Abraham Lincoln and attested to by William H. Seward, Secretary of State.
Thank you, General Granger. Now let's hear briefly from a few of our Civil War heroes. You know, I have to mention one thing that's on my mind, and important to this area. The 54th Regiment of Massachusetts, pretty much everybody's heard about. And when I was doing a little bit of research for the school, for the students to see who could they represent, two things happened, because I want to show you how far we've come in our progress as a nation, despite some of the problems that we still are challenged with. For Juneteenth celebration, there was this old list of 5 heroes you should recognize. I included some of them, but I didn't include all of them because they were all men. But then when I did some further research, I found plenty of women, plenty of men and women of all races that were Civil War heroes that we're not familiar with those names. So I urge all of you, when you get some free time, look beyond the Harriet Tubmans, although she's here tonight because she had such a pivotal role in helping to change the trajectory of the war, among other things. But look beyond some of those common names and look for yourself. I want to share really briefly the rededication of the 54th Regiment. There was a Cape Codder, born and raised on Cape Cod, who was a 3-star Army general. His name is Gary Brittle. And he gave the speech at that commemoration. So look that up too. Look online and hear about that monument and why it's so important to Massachusetts. And also, I wanted to make sure that Cape Cod knows that they have, Gary's Cape Verdean, that they have members that have grown up here on Cape Cod and are still serving our armed services at the highest level. He's a chief of staff for the U.S. Army at the Pentagon. Also, we have a civil rights war hero that has a marker at the boardwalk in Sandwich. He was born into slavery, Joseph Wilson, born in Virginia in 1843, the son of a slave, and he was likely sold, eventually landing in Louisiana. His military records show that in New Orleans in September of 1862, he enlisted as a private in the 1st Louisiana National Guard, one of the first black regiments to fight in the Union Army. New stories, important stories of the Civil War. So when you get up to the landing in Sandwich, go take a look and see the marker for he and his wife, who they don't know the story how they ended up in Massachusetts, but they ended up in Massachusetts and lived here in Sandwich on Cape Cod. So just wanted to share a little bit of the history and bring it home, past and present. Our first Civil War hero is going to be played by Terrence Davison. Terrence will be speaking the words of Alexander Augusta for you, and then Robert Small. Thank you.
I am Alexandra Augusta. I was one of the first black physicians to sign up for the Union Army in 1861. At one point, I was one of the highest ranking African Americans serving in the Army when I rose to the rank of major. I was later transferred to Washington, D.C. after 2 Union white assistant surgeons complained about having to report to a black man. Even after the war ended, I continued to serve as a doctor and fight for the rights of my people. I paved the way for many other black military leaders to rise through the ranks after me. The first black general during the Civil War, during the World War I, General Benjamin Davis Sr., as well as General Colin Powell, and Cape Cod-born Lieutenant General Gary Britto, who currently serves in the U.S. Army. To me, Juneteenth is an important recognition of the wrongs done to my people and a positive step toward the future. Robert Small was a slave on the Confederate blockade, and he was a runner. Oh wait, I'm sorry. I am Robert Small. I was a slave on the Confederate blockade runner. Later, I impersonated the ship's captain, then took over the ship and led the rest of the slaves on the ship and their families to freedom. Then I joined the Union Navy, where I served as a pilot and captain. My efforts inspired future civil rights activists resisting discrimination to pursue integration of black people into the U.S. Navy. By 1944, there were roughly 100,000 black men in the Navy in the Golden 13th, who were the first black naval officers candidates class. They scored a collective 3.89 out of 4.0 to become the highest average of any class in the Navy history. My demonstration of black excellence as a military pilot was also a prelude to the Tuskegee Airmen, the first black flying unit in the U.S. Army, and one of the Army Air Force's most successful and most decorated escort group in World War II.
I just noticed that. They're tall too. I'll just lean up a little bit. Our next Civil War hero is actually played by a young man who is visiting from New York. And Hassan will play John Lawson, Civil War hero.
My name is John Lawson. As a black man, I enlisted in the Union Navy in December 1863. During successful attacks against Fort Morgan on August 5th of 1864, rebel gunboats rammed my ship, the USS Hartford, in the Battle of Mobile Bay. My ship was badly damaged. The shell whipped onto the ship's deck, killing 5 of the 6-man crew. I was the only survivor, but severely wounded in the leg as I was thrown violently against the side of the ship. But I regained my composure, promptly returned to my station, and although urged to go below for treatment, steadfastly continued to supply the gunners with ammunition to fight the Confederates through the remainder of the battle. I was later awarded the Medal of Honor for my bravery and heroism. One before me, William Carnery, of the Massachusetts 54th Colored Infantry in July 1863, who infamously kept the flag from touching the ground, was the first black recipient of the Medal of Honor, along with Robert Augustus Sweeney, the only black American to have been awarded 2 Medals of Honor. We would collectively comprise 92 black Americans receiving this honor. Thank you.
These young people are great, huh? For the next Civil War hero, I'd like to bring our colleague and of the League of Women Voters Cape Cod, and someone who mentored me into joining the league. Maddie Ligon will share some words of Susan Baker King Taylor. I made it. All right, I'm Maddie Ligon. I am with the League of Women Voters and putting out an open invitation to everyone. Don't be deceived by the League of Women Voters title. Since the 1970s, men have joined the League of Women Voters, U.S., Massachusetts, as well as our local chapters in the state of Massachusetts. But I'm not letting any one of you out of here before I let you know that the young man who just finished reading, is my grandson. My grandson. Nobody else's. Mine. All mine. And he's entering senior at Providence College as of September. And he is quite the violinist. I didn't want to hammer him about bringing his violin today, but I'm very proud of him. I'm very proud of him, and I'm sure you can see that. Now, the person I was asked to do was Susan Baker King Taylor, and I shall attempt that. I was born into slavery in Georgia in 1848.
went to live with my free grandmother in Savannah, where I was secretly educated by teachers and tutors, defying laws prohibiting formal education for blacks. After escaping slavery with my uncle and others at just 14 years old, I became the first black teacher to openly educate African Americans in Georgia. I worked as a nurse and laundress for the 33rd United States Colored Infantry Regiment and taught soldiers to read and write. I learned to handle a musket very well. After the war, in 1866, my husband and I moved to Savannah, Georgia, and opened a school for black children. When he died and the school failed, I took a job as a domestic servant with a wealthy family and moved to Boston. In 1902, I became the first and only black woman to write a memoir about my experiences in the Civil War, reminiscences of my life in camp with the 33rd United States Colored Troops. First South Carolina Volunteers. I wrote of the persistent racism decades after the conflict, but reflected on a glorious time of the fight for freedom. I joined ranks with other pioneers fighting for freedom throughout American history, including Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Rosa Parks, Madam C.J. Walker, and Shirley Chisholm, Ord Lord, up to today's leaders, including Marquis Diaz, born of Cape Cod roots. She has spoken up about racial injustice at rallies and in her community, but also continues to push for more representation in books and in schools' curriculums. Thank you for listening.
Little typo, not Maddie's fault, but that last person is Marley Diaz. And she is, I believe, a graduating senior this year or next. Do you know Mrs. Rose, our mom? How old Scotty's daughter is? Hello? Did they leave? Anyway, she's a young lady accepted at almost all of the Ivy League schools that I mentioned. And actually, the cousin, second or third cousin of General Gary Brittle that I mentioned. So Cape Cod has some moving and happening young folks, which is nice to see. I want to thank Lori and Doug Dewar for being our flag bearers. We have two more people. And standing there the whole time. You didn't have to do that. That was very nice. Good soldiers. Lori is the superintendent of Falmouth schools. So thank you for coming out here and supporting your students and the town, Lori. Lori's also going to share some words from Clara Barton, the only non-person of color. Wendy, I'm sorry. I have the wrong people. No wonder you didn't have it. I'm sorry. We had a lot of change of order here for people that got held up by the traffic, and I think some of the younger folks fright. I'm sorry. Wendy St. Julian, who is the wife of the assistant principal, Henry St. Julian. Thank Falmouth High School for educating their students about Black history in a lot of things, but helping to put this together. So just give them a thank you. Wendy's so sorry. I recruited her at the last minute. I forgot who I asked. You're lucky if I didn't come by and grab you to do this. Okay, you all set?
I am Clara Barton, and as a white woman, I was born free, but I was one of the Civil War's most famous women. Before the Civil War, I was a teacher in New Jersey, and at the age of 16, then at the age of 30, opened a free school in Bordertown. After leaving that free school, they hired a man to be principal rather than me, and I wasn't happy. So during the war, I did risk my life distributing supplies to soldiers. I started off assisting the wounded at the First Battle of Bull Run in July 1861. I remained on the battlefields throughout the war, tending the wounded on both sides. I escaped death several times, including during the Battle of Antietam, when a bullet whizzed past my arm and killed the person who was behind me. After the war, I went on to establish the American Red Cross. I also worked at the U.S. Patent Office in Washington, D.C. I may have been the federal government's first female employee. Some of the men resented my presence, even spitting tobacco on my skirt. I paved the way for not only nursing standards, both military and civilian, but the many white ally and activist groups that exist today, including on Cape Cod.
So it was just by chance asking Wendy to do that. She's a nurse too. And we have for probably one of our most famous Civil War heroes, Renelia. Took my time. I wanted to say your name correctly. Renelia Corknife. Right? Will share some words from the infamous Harriet Tubman.
I am Harriet Tubman. I was born into slavery on Maryland Eastern Shore in 1821. I escaped from slavery in 1849. Although I'm the best known for my courage and acumen as conductor on the Underground Railroad, as an ambitious abolition and activist leading hundreds of enslaved men, women, and children north to freedom through carefully prescribed routes and a network of safe houses. Once the Civil War started in 1861, I used my skills as a spy and expedition leader for the Union Army. I was a special secret military weapon. In 1862, I traveled to a Union camp in South Carolina to help enslaved people who had joined Union troops. I worked as a cook and a nurse for the troops. Most of these slaves had become enlisted, and the Union troops were in precarious position, essentially encircled, with Confederates on 3 sides and the ocean on the 4th side. Despite being unable to read, I gathered intelligences for the Union Army, hunted for rebel camps, reporting on Confederate movements, organizing scouts to map territories and waterways. I was counted on to pinpoint the location of Confederate troops. In 1863 operation, I provided information regarding the location of Confederate mines, bypassing hidden Confederate torpedoes in the Combahee River. So the Union boats carrying 150 black troops proceeded unharmed. This action made me the first and only woman to organize a military operation during the Civil War. I led the troop in a surprise attack on the plantation of prominent secessionists This was the South's richest land and held in the largest slave populations. The Combahee River raid in June 1863 marked a turning point in my career. Along the routes, my troops stopped at several spots to rescue more than 750 enslaved people, 100 of which went on to serve the Union Army. Our expedition dealt a major military and psychological blow to the Confederacy. I was a pioneer of many black women who also broke barriers while serving in the U.S. military. These women also worked on the front lines or provided support to the U.S. soldiers and civilian employees. Cathay Williams was the first black American female to enlist in the U.S. Army in 1866. Marceline J. Harris was the first black female general in the Air Force. Brigadier General Hazel Johnson was the first female and black female chief of the Army Corps, and Major General Naja West is the highest ranking black female in the military. Thank you.
So let's thank all of our Civil War heroes. General Granger, Representative David Vieira, Henry St. Julian for pulling the students together, and all of you for coming out here today. How many people knew that enlisted black men and women were in the Civil War? Yeah, good, good. And how many people knew Harriet Tubman was a spy for the Army? Everybody knew she had the skills of surveillance. Okay, well, that really concludes our program for you this evening. I hope that you come out. Saturday's supposed to be a nice day. Come out. Bring people that are not registered to vote. And there's other voter information that you can get. We have a really important state election year and local elections, so it's really important that people engage. And also, as you celebrate Juneteenth, remember that flag and the representation of equality and justice for all of us. Have a good evening, and thank you.